Hi, this is Walter Weesey with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing with my weekly Montana Guide Flies fly tying video. What I'm doing here is more of a demonstration of a style than anything else. I'm tying this in late October, and so it's kind of beta season, and so I'm doing a Baetis Nymph, but I use the same basic style for a lot of mayflies, and as much as anything, I'm showing off the material here. This is stuff called Midge Diamond Braid. It's a Montana Fly Company product, and you can see here it's a kind of a fine braided material, and you can get the same stuff actually at craft stores. Here's a craft store version, and you see that's actually much thicker. Hopefully that shows up. That the Montana Fly Company is the purple here, and you see how much thicker that is. And so I do like the Montana Fly Company stuff. If I could figure out who was making this for them, I'd buy it from them, because there are some colors that MFC does not have. But this color is the golden olive colorway, and you can see that's kind of hopefully shows up okay. It's golden olive as the as it says on the package, and I'm going to darken that up a little bit with a marker as well. But I also like this rust color, which is kind of an orangey brown, and again, you can darken that up with a magic marker or just by having a darker rib. And then I like this red and black, particularly in the fall. That color is called Bloody Red. Use that on my Euroflash nymph. And then Vivus makes a similar stuff. Here's a black version of it. And again, I'm pretty sure the Vivus stuff is actually the same as this Gutermann braid that I got at a craft store, because you see that's exactly the same diameter, same color. But anyhow, this stuff is good for making kind of fast, durable, simple flies, and just kind of want to show you how to do it. All right, to get started here, I'm going to put a size 16 scud hook in the vise. And then for video purposes, this is an offset scud hook, but I'm actually going to bend that a little bit just so it kind of stays in focus a little better. In reality, you would not want to do that. Now you're going to need to play a little bit with the way you kind of begin things on this fly. This one's a 16, which actually is the right size for a PMD. It's actually a little big for a blueing olive, but I found it was really hard to get things in focus with a size 18, which is what I did first. And so anyhow, I got a 16 here, and this is how I would kind of work things for a 16 to get the kind of body size and taper I want. On an 18, I'll often actually start with that body braid stuff I just showed you. But on this one, on a 16, I'm going to start with olive dun 8/0 thread, and obviously match thread to the Mayfly color that you're trying to match. And so I went ahead and tied that in, and I wrapped down a little bit. I'm going to trim that tag end, and then I'm going to wrap down a little bit further. And I'm already starting to kind of create a body taper here, because you don't want a really, really fat body here. And so I'm going to actually create my body taper on this fly primarily with thread. Now, if I was tying an 18, I would do it with just a couple layers of that Midge Body Thread. I wouldn't even use the 8/0 here until I was further along in the fly. And like I said, you'll want to play with that to try to get the diameter of the body you want. I generally want a pretty skinny body on most of my small mayflies. Now my tail on this fly is going to just be medium Pardo Coq de Leon, and I use Coq de Leon for most of my tails on mayfly patterns now, both dry and nymph, and that's just because it's durable. It's got the speckling in it that I want, and it's more or less the right color. This fly is very similar to a WD-40, and in that one you'd use mallard, but really any kind of a feather with speckle that you like. So I've got, I don't even know how many that is, about that many fibers. Pretty sparse because it is a mayfly tail. And I'm going to tie that in here up where I started that thread, and then more or less touching turns back. And I'm going to go well down the hook shank here. Now if I was tying this with a bead head, I'd go further down the hook shank, and then just to kind of leave room for that bead. And you know what, that's actually a little bit too long of a tail. The first sample I did, I made the tails too short, and this one I made them too long. So I just backed off that thread a little bit. I'm going to grab those butt ends and then just shorten things up slightly there. And then repeat myself. That's about right. Anyhow, essentially what I was saying there before I just decided I made a mistake. If I was tying this thing with a bead head, I'd essentially go maybe 5, 8 more wraps down the hook shank. In fact, I'm going to back off one. Um, just to kind of leave room for that bead at the front of the fly. I do tie this fly with brass beads some. I don't tie this thing on a jig head or with a tungsten bead much at all because I'm usually fishing it pretty shallow water and or underneath a dry fly. Particularly in the summer, I'm fishing it under a dry fly. And, and then this time of year in the fall, I'm actually going to wind up fishing this thing um, underneath another nymph, a heavy nymph. Either underneath a heavy nymph or where I want it only floating 6 inches under water anyway. And so I don't usually even use a bead at all on the Baetis version here. Anyhow, I whip finished that olive thread. Now I'm going to take my Midge Body Thread. And I've kind of got a little bit of a taper here on the hook just from the way I tied things in there. And so I'm just going to kind of paint the hook shank with this golden olive. So I'm going to start that just kind of right up at the end of that thread body. And again, make several turns down the hook shank here. Here I want to go down to about there. And then just trim that tag end. And believe it or not, just that having the tag end versus not having the tag end is going to create a little bit of a taper. And then if you find yourself getting too much of a cord on the body, because on this fly I don't want a whole lot of cording on that body, I'm going to just let it hang for a second, maybe back off by turning it counterclockwise. But anyhow, I'm about down to there, and you can kind of see there's a little bit of a taper to that. I'm going to grab a black Sharpie here, and just plain old black Sharpie, and then I'm going to color that thread. And see, if this thread were a little darker, I probably wouldn't worry about it. That golden olive, I kind of wish it was a copper olive or a brown olive, because I want it a little bit darker than it comes out of comes off the spool, or I want the fly to be a little darker than it comes off the spool. So I'm just going to go ahead and color that thread black. And I've got a couple more turns I need to make going down the hook shank here to get to the end of that thread. That's because I never quite get, all the way to the end of my thread with that marker. And so make about 2 more turns down that hook. Now I'm at the end of that body. And I'm going to go ahead and rib that fly. And you notice I'm making those ribbing turns really close together. This is as much as anything to darken the fly as it is to rib it. And so, if I was using you could easily use like a stretch material, micro tubing or something like that, or wire. And I didn't want to darken the fly, I wouldn't rib it this tightly. All right, and I get up to there, and I'm going to go ahead and actually not whip finish this. Normally, if it was a bigger fly or I wasn't worried about bulk, I would just whip finish that. But I'm actually going to restart that olive thread, and that's how I'm going to secure that Midge Body Thread, is just by my beginning wraps of that olive thread, and then I trim both those tag ends. Okay, and then my wing case on this fly is going to be medium black hollow tinsel. And mayflies, when they're getting ready to emerge, often have a dark wing pad. If you were tying this just for general purposes, you could use a different color of tinsel or feather fibers, whatever you like. But I tend to like the black on this guy. And the same goes for the PMD version in the summertime. Now, if I'm tying it purple or red, I'll use opal tinsel usually. All right, so just kind of tying that in, making a nice little thread base. And then my thorax on this fly is going to be kind of just a gray dubbing blend. This is an old Spirit River mottled nymph dubbing, which I don't even know if is made anymore because Hairline bought out Spirit River. It doesn't matter. Go ahead and get just kind of any kind of relatively coarse gray dubbing. And that's for the Baetis version. I might use, a PMD color or something, or a pheasant tail color for the PMD version to make it look a little bit like a pheasant tail. But just a relatively coarse dubbing because I'm going to use this as my legs as well. And I'm just going to kind of dub a single strand thorax there. I have a feeling that's going to be too much dubbing. In fact, I'm positive that's too much dubbing. That's, you notice I just ripped that right off. I kind of like this kind of dubbing, and that's one of the reasons I use a single strand technique for this sort of thing, because if I screw up, I can easily fix it, basically. And that doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, you notice that's kind of a mess there. I'm going to brush that out anyway, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm going to pull over that wing case and make a couple turns here, right behind the eye, and then I'm going to back that, I'm going to bend that back on itself, make a couple more turns. And before I even cut that, I'm going to go ahead and come in and make about a 4-turn whip finish here. I think that was actually 3. I'm actually going to do another one, just because I wasn't sure about that one whip finish I made. But trim the thread, and then I kind of like to just come in here with a scissor blade. You see, notice I'm not even using I'm not trying to just cut it. I line up the one blade, and sometimes you can kind of nick the tinsel. That time it didn't really want to nick, and then I cut it. Kind of line up the blade and then chop rather than trying to just snip. And then before I do kind of my last steps here, I'm going to grab that Sharpie again, and this is totally optional. I don't think the fish really care, but it does look good. And I'm going to color the back of that those thread wraps there at the eye, just to kind of darken the back of that. Then my final step, and this is again optional, I'm going to come in with my UV cure finish, and I'm going to kind of brush, or second to last step I should say, I'm going to brush all my material down, and this is UV flow loon, but you can use whatever you like. And I'm just going to kind of come in and make a very small, just like one drop, kind of down the back of that. And then I like to, if I'm using flow, which is my preferred resin, I like to invert that quickly because I don't want that to get into the dubbing very much. And then just kind of zap that. My voice might change because I'm looking away from it. All right, and then the tying of that fly is done. One last step here. I want that to be even buggier, and so I'm going to come in with some Velcro and just kind of pick that out a little bit more. Because that is my legs on this fly, and Baetis nymphs are swimmers, and so they have pretty prominent legs. And if it winds up getting a little too fuzzy like that, I'll just trim those even with the hook gape. But there you have kind of a simple Baetis nymph. I don't really have a name for that. Like I said, it's kind of a WD-40 variation. I'm usually going to tie this one in an 18 and then the PMD in a 16, but 16, 18 for whatever, whatever mayflies you're matching with this. It's not a good material to use on big mayflies, I don't think. This is good stuff also for midges. You can tie a midge, especially with this black stuff. Just one layer of that's a perfectly good midge. That actually works really well in our private lakes. I had a guy catch a 4-pound fish on a fly that was a bead, a hook, and then this stuff. But as always, thanks for watching. And if you find this video or this pattern to be helpful, you can throw me a tip at my Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. And go to my website at flyfishmontana.biz for fishing reports, information on my guided trips in Yellowstone country, and a full description or a full pattern description and recipe of this fly. Thanks.